Harriet, are you familiar with the Andy Johnson case?
Yeah, I've been working with Andy.
Good, good,
Yes.
good.
He is a different attorney out of Cheyenne, but I visit with Andy on a pretty regular basis. We were in Riverton together when I don't remember what month that was, but he and I both spoke at a conference at maybe June of this year.
Yeah, I was talking to Glenn Woods, and he was on the radio with Andy at the time, and then I went on, and I told Andy, I said, keep it, you gotta fight.
You gotta fight.
You gotta fight. I mean, they had us at $680,000 that we would have owed in fines had I lost our court case.
Yeah, we cannot empower these agencies or our government to impose those kinds of fines. I think they're unconstitutional. I just
Exactly.
think they're flat unconstitutional. Questions or comments? Yes, sir.
So Harry, this guy that's got a $67 million bill, basically, is that a situation where they can attach the land and foreclose the land?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Are they gonna do that?
No, I won.
Oh, you won?
I won. Yeah, we won the liability phase of it.
But
But if he had lost, then yes, but we won the liability phase of it, and so we never went to the remedy phase.
So what
because-
process would they take the land by? How would they do it?
Well, you get a court judgment against you. So what happens in these cases is that you have two phases. And the liability phase, you can get a jury. And a lot of people don't know that. But if you're ever dealing with the EPA, the Clean Water Act, any of those, always ask for a jury. And so we had a jury, and we had a 2-week trial, and the jury found in our favor and found that David Hamilton, my client, had not violated the Clean Water Act by straightening his irrigation ditch. But what would have happened is if he had lost, then the federal government will present evidence, and we will present evidence about what a reasonable penalty would be. And then the judge gets to decide. It's not for the jury. The judge gets to decide. And it might be $250,000, it might be $1 million. It depends in part on whether you're wealthy or not. So it can be very, very, very burdensome. And it is really hard to win Clean Water Act cases. Really hard to win Clean Water Act cases. So there have been a lot of penalties imposed. If you don't pay them, if you were to go bankrupt, you can go bankrupt, or they can foreclose on you. And one of the things that they present during the course of the hearing is your income tax returns. And they brought in our case, he didn't get to testify again because we didn't go to remedy. They brought in an appraiser. And he would have appraised the property as to what it was worth so that the judge could do an appropriate onerous and burdensome penalty to make him hurt.
So this navigable water situation is actually an erosion of our private property,
It's the point of it.
of the rights.
It is the point of it. I will tell you, we all know how important water is. We know how important it is in the western United States. We know how important it is in terms of there is what I would refer to, and we now have a Supreme Court justice who kind of adheres to this idea that most of your older water rights in Wyoming and in the West are held by ag because they're who settled, and we have a first in time, first in right, prior appropriation system. There are people who want to change that, and they believe that those early priority water rights should not be assigned by priority to ag, but should be assigned based upon the highest and best use, with a federal agency deciding what that highest and best use is.
Okay.
So what you have is that the point of what EPA is doing under the Clean Water Act and the new proposed rules and regulations, it's purely a property grab. It has nothing to do with the Clean Water Act. Our water is cleaner now than it has been in hundreds of years. I mean, it is, our environment in this country is very, very, very clean. There are situational situations, I'm not suggesting otherwise. The North Platte River, for example, you don't have high pollutants in there. This is a land grab. This is a water grab. It's to make your property worthless or to take your water without it. The Metropolitan Water District down in, we were talking about that earlier today, in Los Angeles, they take a tour of Wyoming every year to see what's going on in the Green River Basin. That's the headwaters for the Colorado River. They know more about what is going on in water rights in Wyoming in the Green River Basin than most Wyomingites do. It's money. In Colorado, they pay about $35,000 an acre foot right now for municipal water supplies.
Wyoming, since they supposedly own all the water, how do they react to what the EPA is doing in a land grab situation? I mean, are they cooperative? Are they pushing back, or what, I mean, is that?
No, we don't do anything. I went to them and tried to get them to help me on the Hamilton case. I went to the state engineer, who's a friend of mine. I went to the attorney general, and I met with them, and I explained what was going on. I said, this is very clearly an effort to use the Clean Water Act, water quality statutes, to take control over water quantity. Water quantity is supposed to be administered by the states. It's prior appropriation system, state engineer's office, all of that, board of control. I said, it's very clear that they are using, this is my second case, that they are very clearly using water quality statutes to take control of water quantity, and I did not get anywhere. They would not help. I thought that if I brought the state engineer's office in and the attorney general's office in, and they pushed back against the federal government, I could potentially get them to go to way, and I couldn't get them.
The state would want to maintain control of our waters.
Yes, they should.
What's going on with that?
They should, and if I were the attorney general, I would have been in the middle of that like that, because I know what the feds are doing. I fought too many of these. It's very clear to me what they're doing.
What's going on with that is that we've had 2 governors in a row who are federal persecutors.
Yep.
Quit voting the R.
Well, and it really is a problem when you've got somebody who identifies, because that's who handles your Clean Water Act cases, is out of that office. And when they identify that way, it's a problem. And that was under Friedenthal when I went to him to try to get some help on that case, and I didn't get it. I wish I would have. I think it was important. You've asked a very good question, but it's a question that should not just be directed to me. It needs to be directed at the people who make those decisions, because those are wrong decisions to make. They need to fight. Here's what you need to do if you're the governor. At every single opportunity, you need to push back against the feds. You need to call them into the office, and when they say, I hear about this situation with 2.1 acres at Wyoming, get out of my state. And you make a big deal of it, and you make it very uncomfortable for them, because here's something else I've learned. They don't try cases. They don't want to try cases. They don't like to try cases. They really don't even like to fight. What they like to have is they like to have the authority to hurt somebody with fines of $37,500 a day. But when push comes to shove, they don't like fighting.
They're bullies.
If you had states that really pushed to get back against a lot of these agencies, we could succeed on a lot of these battles.
The Oklahoma AG's office has something that we should try here.
What's that?
They have a department that deals solely with federal law. They have 5 attorneys there. They read the regulations and they push back.
We did. Dave
We used to.
Friedenthal did away with it. It was called the Office of Federal Land Policy. And it was staffed by some very good ones. It was in 2000, he was elected in 2002. No, he was elected in 2000 and, yeah, he would have been elected in 2002, right? And I believe that office was gone by 2003.
Matt Mead won't bring it back, I guarantee that.
But it was the Office of Federal, OFLP.
What's he got, 27
Office of Federal
lawsuits
Land
going right
Policy.
now?
It's a very good idea, and it was in place, and it was what was really good about it, there were several things that were good about it. I really liked the model. What was really good about it was that every time there was a proposed rulemaking that came out in this person did nothing but monitor this nonstop. And any time that there was a proposed regulation or scoping or anything else that came out in this, it went to every single agency in the state of Wyoming that could potentially be impacted by it. Then they hounded those agencies so that those agencies would write comments as to why it shouldn't be adopted. So for example, the roadless rule, when it was adopted in the 1999 to 2001 period, I think Wyoming submitted like 27 different comments from 27 different agencies. So our Forest Service, our Department of Ag, our State Engineer's Office, our Department of Taxation, of Revenue, all of our departments commented on the roadless rule. And when I was arguing that in front of Judge Brimmer, that was very, very important to him, because there were 1.2 million comments submitted on the roadless rule, but only about 67,000 that were substantive. And we had those that were from Wyoming, which I really focused on. And whenever the other side would say, oh my God, Judge, there were 1.2 million comments submitted and 99% of them were in support of the roadless rule, he said, I don't care what Wyoming say.
Yeah.
It was very important, and so that office would shepherd these, so whether it's the Department of Health and Human Services, or it's the Department of Education, or whatever it was, even though it was Office of Federal Land Policy, they did all agencies. So it would be HHS, it would be Department of Education, Department of Energy, all of those. Wyoming as a state participated very effectively in the regulatory process, but that office was closed in 2003. The way
That's
the original
sad.
states were set up was are designed to be individual, if you will. You have New Jersey, and New Jersey is not California, and New Mexico is not Montana, and all states have their own independent personalities, if you will, and their own independent freedoms. We were talking this evening, and I think it's something that's very important for people to recognize. Our Wyoming Constitution provides us with more protections and more liberties than the federal Constitution does.
Yep.
And the federal Constitution is a floor. The way that that's been interpreted is when you look at the Bill of Rights of the federal Constitution, those are the minimum of what our government at both the state and federal and county level must provide to us. But our state constitution provides even greater liberties and even greater freedoms. And that's the way it should be. California can pass whatever ridiculous laws that it wants to. But we're not going to pass those laws in Wyoming. Wyoming should be able to do what it wants to do. We have our own independent personality. We have our own constitution. Part of what I see with this huge effort at the regulations and the federalization and the taking over of our agencies is that they are literally attempting to make it impossible to escape the stupidity of what some of these states do.
Yep.
I don't want to be like California. I don't want to be like New York. I don't want to be like Connecticut. I don't want to be like Rhode Island. I want Wyoming to be different. We're independent. We're self-sufficient. We are kind. We are generous. We have so many things that are so different than what you see in other places. What they're trying to do is to prevent people from using their feet, using their ability to leave California, to say your policies are really bad. Because they like what California is doing, and they want what is going on in California to be imposed in Wyoming, so that people have to stay in California, or if they move to Wyoming, it doesn't matter anymore.
Our knee-jerk reaction to all the regulatory coming out of Washington and elsewhere, historically, to me, has always been, well, I'm blaming the environmental movement. But it's become so large and encompassing, am I starting to blame the wrong movement?
No, because that's very much a part of it. In fact, the roadless rule, one of the things that we brought is we brought what's called a Federal Advisory Committee Act claim when we challenged the roadless rule. And what that did is for the first time on a rulemaking, we were actually able to get discovery of the federal employees and some of the environmental groups. And what they'd done is they had completely conspired to write the roadless rule before it ever went out for scoping. So I have emails and documents from August of 1999. The notice of intent was not issued until October of 1999, and the emails and the meetings were being held in the year previous to that, the purpose of which was to write the rule, and then they went out for scoping after the fact. It's one of the reasons we were able to show that it violated the National Environmental Policy Act, because they put the cart before the horse. So we did what was called a Federal Advisory Committee Act claim, and I got discovery. I went back to D.C. and I took 2 weeks of depositions of a bunch of federal employees. I was scheduled to take a bunch of depositions of the environmental groups, and Dave Friedenthal was elected in January of 2003. My depositions were scheduled for February of 2003, and he shut them all down. And would not allow me to take those depositions.
I think that gentleman over there had a question.
Yes.
Regarding your case up in Warren, what powers do you have as a citizen attorney representing somebody if the governor doesn't tell the feds that they have no jurisdiction? Can you, as an attorney, work nullification under the 10th Amendment without the support of the state?
You know, I really did want the state involved in this, and they weren't going to go there. They might now, because I think it's become even more obvious as to what this grab is all about. You might see somewhat of a change of heart, I don't know. What you do is you make sure you get a jury. You gotta have a jury.
Gotta have a jury.
And you, because keep in mind, that federal judge is a federal employee. All right? That's just the reality. And you have got to have a jury. And so if you have a jury, the U.S. attorneys are not very good at trying cases. They're good at bullying people, but they're not good trial attorneys. They make some really fundamental mistakes. They're not used to being in front of a jury. They don't typically have to go in front of a jury. And they don't know how to act in front of them. And they make some really fundamental mistakes with this jury. That's why it's so important to do it. So you've got to make sure, and you don't let up. I mean, you really fight. And David Hamilton fortunately had the resources and the personality and the fortitude to keep fighting this fight, because it took 6 years. That's the other thing. The federal government can seek $37,500 a day from you in fines, but they get to decide when to bring the suit. So my client did the work in 2005. They received the first report of it in the spring of 2006, second report in the fall of 2006. They finally made it out on the ground in August of 2007. They never issued a notice of violation until May of 2009, and they filed a lawsuit in October of 2010. And then all of those 5 years, plus the 3 years, and then we didn't try the case until 2014. I was hired in 2008. It took me 6 years to try this case.
Jesus.
And the entire time, that 37.5 is going every single day.
I was following Taylor Haynes' his campaign. He was talking about the story of the landowner, and he said that had been going on since the mid-90s or early 90s, and he had been
Yes.
raising fees for a long, long time, and it only came to a head recently. The reason it hadn't come to a head for that long, 20 years, was because he would call the county sheriff, Clark County Sheriff, every time that the feds would come on his property, and the Clark County Sheriff would pick him off. Is that, I mean, it just sounds too
Here's
simple
some
to be
things
true.
that happened
Is
about
that-
the Clive and Bundy thing that I just sent me right over the edge. The BLM has no legal authority to carry a gun on your property.
That's right.
Alright? They shouldn't be carrying guns. The BLM is nothing but a landowner. And if you and I have neighboring property and I'm trespassing on your property, you don't pull a gun on me. You call the sheriff. The fact that the BLM had guns and snipers and tasers and all of
Dogs.
that, every one of them should have been thrown in jail. The governor should have been involved in throwing him in jail. The sheriff should have been involved in throwing him in jail. That was nothing but a dispute between two landowners. I don't care if Clive and Bundy was trespassing or not. Self-help isn't allowed. It's illegal. I don't care if you're the federal government. What shocked me about what all went on out there was very few people understood how incredibly frightening that entire scene was. That you had a bunch of federal agencies packing heat in a trespass dispute.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
But they did have, the sheriff does have the authority.
Absolutely.
To do that. He can-
Absolutely.
So if I were in that position and I had some sort of federal agent, for example, I mean.
Get off my property.
The position that I'm in, being a father, having, and my wife, we have children. And that's the one thing that I could see happening is the CPS coming to take my children for some reason,
Call,
right?
call
You can
911.
call the sheriff.
Call the
And they
sheriff.
can- And they can, so it's a situation like that,
Yeah.
that's the most
And
relevant.
even if, and then the trespass action is you file a lawsuit. You still have to file the lawsuit, and then if you, I mean, there is a process. We are a nation of laws. We are a nation of laws.
That's right.
The federal government has concluded that that the federal government and employees have concluded they don't have to comply with them anymore. And I know it's scary, and I know when you have children, it's easy for me to stand up here, but the fact is, somebody comes to my door, you show me the warrant, and if I feel threatened, or if I feel I need to get somebody else involved, I'm getting somebody else involved. What happened with that was an absolute travesty, and it was a terrible, terrible, and again, maybe these things happen for a reason. It woke up a lot of people. What are they doing with guns? Why do they have guns pointed at people?
And killing his cattle.
Yeah. And killing his cattle.
I
And
mean,
killing his cattle.
bulldozing his cattle right in the ground.
Yes, over here.
We're looking at our water shed down there. In California, you know, they're going into a drought, and I read recently that they have studied tree rings of trees that are like in some lake north of Lake Tahoe, like they're prehistoric trees. And they found that the California area has undergone drought periods of as long as 260 years. So my question is, if this turns out to be a big one out there, what do you think is gonna happen?
Well, there's a couple of things. Part of the problem that California is dealing with in terms of their drought situation is they make really stupid decisions. Just a couple of weeks ago, they released over 27,000 acre feet of water to do some scouring on a channel. Stupid idea. Dumb. I mean, when you're in this kind of an extreme drought situation, you don't release water. Like I said, poor countries don't care about the environment. You make yourself poor, you're not going to be able to worry about the environment. A lot of the problems you have in California are man-made. I mean, they just are. They've got dams, they've got reservoirs, they have the ability to provide water to their citizens and to their ag. They've diverted it for environmental purposes. They're just dumb. So what are they going to do? It's what I'm talking about when I say that there are people out there who believe that there are higher and better uses for our water. We shouldn't be growing corn and alfalfa. We should be dealing with sending water to Mexico, sending water to Nevada, sending water to Arizona, sending water to Southern California. It is going to be a battle. It's why I fight the EPA on the Clean Water Act every chance I have, because it isn't about that particular fight. It's about control over the water. It's a battle that we have got to be fighting a lot harder.
So if you're just a regular person, is there anything you can do?
Tell your governor to fight water. Tell your representatives, water is absolutely critical. Do not allow the federal government to come in here and take it. Yes, sir.
I was just on your comment on the bullying and back to Clyde Bundy, like you said in the courtroom, the government isn't qualified to argue, and they usually back down, or you have an easy time with it. Same thing is that proved too that civil disobedience backs them down too.
It does. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. It really is. And it's one of the reasons why I've always been a strong advocate of speaking out very, very strongly anytime you feel that somebody is doing something, whether they're in a position of power or not, because the government and government employees and bureaucrats tend to leave loudmouths alone a lot more than they do the people who sit down and take it.
Yeah.
And I've taken on some battles with our previous governor, and what I realized is the only way that I could fight him was to make him think I was crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
It works.
I mean, he knew that I would go public. If he didn't leave me alone, I'd go public. And a lot of people are scared of him. I'm not scared of him, but you have to say you're not going to do that. I'm not going to tolerate it. And what you find with bureaucrats, because they're not accountable for their actions, they want the path of least resistance.
Yep.
Had they known David Hamilton was going to take this case all the way to trial, they'd have left him alone.
Well, that was used to go out like this audience here. Well, we'll pick him, and we'll take those two to court. So all the rest of you're going to learn a lesson by this, because
Right.
we're going to destroy them too.
Right? Yes, sir.
Just want to make a quick comment. I have a dictionary at home, it's one of those that you put on a pedestal, about this thick, and all that, has every word in the English accent, in the English language, including all the definitions, the Constitution, all these things. The city building codes of Casper, Wyoming are thicker.
Regulations, I mean, it's at the federal level, it's at the state level, it's at the local level. I know.
That's where we got to start, right here in
Yeah.
Casper.
Harriet, have you heard rumors of the state of Wyoming in response to droughts, thinking about assessing charges on private wells?
No.
I have heard that from state water engineer employees, that thought has been bandied about, that, for instance, in the North Platte watershed, they have been thinking about regulating the use of private wells and charging based on the amount of water that those wells produce,
Well, they can regulate them because the water belongs to the state.
and charge for it.
That part I'm not understanding. Yeah, that part I don't understand that, and I don't know what that is about. I'd have to look into that perhaps a bit more. We deal a lot with the state engineer's office, probably more than any other agency.
I'm sure there'd be a lot of pushback with the citizens who have wells, but I have heard
Yeah.
that was a threat that
Well, we are a conjunctive use state, which means we try to manage groundwater and surface water conjunctively. If they are hydrologically connected, we have to manage them conjunctively to the extent that we can, which becomes very, very complicated. So what is the challenge is that we are needing to deal with it more and more simply because we have more of a demand on the resources. So we do see more regulation now than I did 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned as a remedy, one of the things that we should do is participate in the regulatory process.
Yes.
Now, I'm having trouble getting through to our current county commissioners, and what I feel almost has to be done is at the legal notice, when it appears in the paper as a legal notice, we need to start there before it ever becomes a law or an ordinance.
That's the process. When you go through this document, for example, there may be Department of Justice, Notice of Lodging of Consent Decree under the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, CERCLA. They are notices, there will be notice of institution of formal enforcement proceedings. They provide notices in here too. It's not all regulations, although primarily, but it's notices of regulations, notices of meetings, notices of proposed rules, notices of intent, that type of thing are what are published in here. I actually have one of my businesses is we notify people of all federal and state regulations that impact water and natural resource issues in the state of Wyoming. We don't deal with education, we don't deal with healthcare, we don't deal with any of that. We have members that every day we notify them of any federal or state regulation that will affect water or natural resource issues. So we monitor the Department of Ag, and the Department of Interior, and the Fish and Wildlife Service, and DEQ, and we monitor all those agencies every day to see what they are doing that may affect any of our members in the state of Wyoming or the state of Colorado.
So where are you publishing this? Or
You have to be a member of one of our organization. I can give you a business card. I'm not the one who does it. I have staff who does that. But that's one of the things. But we don't do everything. You know, like we're not going to do the county commissioner stuff because it isn't what I focus on so much. But you have to get involved at the inception of whatever the rulemaking is, whether it's at the county level, city council, state, whatever it is. That's when you have to get involved with these things.
So can you speak to a training or a way to learn that?
Yes.
So you're ready and participating, because if we don't participate there.
Yes. In fact, I could come back up sometime and do that.
Would you?
Yes, or
That would
send
be
my
great.
staff to do it, because they're better at it than I am.
That
But
would be perfect.
yeah, I could work with Kathy at some point. We can come up and do some of that. But yeah, you need to submit comments. You need to participate.
Yes, thank you.
I'll only make one quick comment to that effect. If you don't submit comments during an official scoping period, you won't have standing.
You don't have
to appeal.
standing to later challenge it.
Really?
Yes. Yes,
Wow.
you won't have standing to later challenge it.
Hmm.